Good morning. I had a lot of fun yesterday again. I've been enjoying the episodes, it seems. My sharings more and more. And the last one where I could talk a little bit about quantum physics and peering sideways was satisfying and fun at the same time. Enjoyable. And I want to continue in the vein a little bit because as I research, and there's a wealth of information available on YouTube. I'm more visual learner in many ways. Although words, I like words because there's a lot of room for interpretation, but some concepts lend themselves to visual. I love colors and flashes of colors, and it just was a really good short presentation talking about consciousness. And not only has science seemed to come to terms with the existence of consciousness, as many have noted, quantum physics and elements of Buddhism and Hinduism have begun to blend. We finally found a science in quantum physics that seems to support wisdom of the ages. Seers understood, and their understanding is become validated, increasingly validated, to the point that there's little room for argument. And the little short video I was watching the other day on YouTube was that consciousness causes matter. Sorry, I was a little slow. Let's try that again. Consciousness causes matter. Several interesting things about how atoms can appear and disappear and actually be in two places seemingly at the same time. And the beginnings of this scientific support was recognition of consciousness. And now it's gone even a step farther, placing it inextricably closer to what the sages have been telling us for ages, for a long, long time, that consciousness not only exists, but within consciousness lies the seeds of creation. Creation in the matter that we observe. The so-called reality, which is really nothing more than collective imagination. We're all imagining this together, and there's enough networking and communication that we've included the input from others so deeply that we're no longer able to separate from what we see, what we experience from our five senses, from that of the collective. So, collective imagination, which we've been surrounded, language enhances, cements this collective observations, this collective imagination. And as many things that begin in imagination, they are either discarded through time or become such an intrinsic part of who and what we are that they progress to kind of a collective agreement. So starts off imagination, then through time, apparent consistencies solidify, becoming agreements. And then it takes another step to a secular covenant. Covenant, I like covenant. A selective covenant. And in the classical sense of covenant, it's an agreement between us and the powers that we assign to the above, God, Buddha, Muhammad. So this collective imagination morphs into a collective agreement to the point that it becomes a first religious icon, a religious covenant, and as time passes, it becomes a secular, accepted outside the realms of strict religious adherence, a secular covenant. But as we learn, both through scientific exploration and, for me, the real legitimate explanation lies within the realms of self-examination. So now we've come to a covenant busting, both in the religious sense as well as the secular sense, as quantum physicists tell us that consciousness is the creator. Consciousness creates the images. Creates even more solid than images is what we see as matter. And the funny thing about matter is that it's not what it seems, after all. If we but examine the table that this computer is sitting upon, looks solid to me, looks like it's made out of wood. But if we were able to, and of course, with assistance, we're able to look closer and closer at what we experience as solid, what our senses, what our collective agreements, what our collective covenants, the solidity, vouching for the solidity of the table, of my desk, comes into question, because we start to notice that space is probably closer to 99% what we refer to as empty, even though it's even questionable that what is emptiness? Is devoid of anything? Or consisting of matter in another form, smaller than we've been able to quantify to date? But anyway, it's inarguable that we're surrounded by space. So, what is matter? And why does it matter? What is matter and why does it matter? Yeah. Well, it matters because we've been led to believe that matter is what is. Seem historically to be no argument about the existence of matter. But where did it come from? Well, we talk about chemistry, we talk about stars and the seeding of life and water and comets. But again, this is just our shot in the dark, seeking for explanations, because this is the nature of the beast. This is what drives us as humans. Solve, hopefully resolve, but question. If we're questioning what is matter, does consciousness spring from matter, us? Does it spring from our existence? Or, as we see now, it's more likely that our existence came out of consciousness. So my question on all of this, if indeed, and I have no problem accepting that the real part of me is the origin of all that I had previously called real or reality. The curtains over there, the light to my right, the lamp, the table, my stool, unquestionably real until I started really embracing my, inner consciousness, as we call it, but it's inseparable from outer consciousness. There's no divide. Consciousness simply is. It's us that perceive it here or there. So as I looked into consciousness, as I meditated, pondered, reviewed, experienced consciousness as my ability to accept an expanding experience of consciousness improved, I was able to begin to entertain the ideas that it just might be possible to create a new reality, an expanding reality that helped in the discarding of the ego, the sense of separation, and led to embracing the wholeness, the unity, no longer seeing divisions, no longer seeing or feeling or experiencing any difference between me and you and everybody else, and even beyond everything else. And from this unity, this expanding unity that knows no bounds, this unity expands to infinity. Just as this acceptance, two things spring immediately to mind. First is responsibility, because responsibility has always been a big one for me. Responsibility to myself, self-responsibility, because responsibility of others was never in my domain. I saw responsibility on a very, very personal level. It was okay to be judgmental about myself as I progressed in this acceptance. Not only acceptance, but embracing of my personal responsibility. Because I felt like within this responsibility is the keys that any contribution that I may make to the greater other comes from, springs from, emerges from personal responsibility. This personal responsibility included taking care of the vessel, nurturing the mind, learning how to utilize the gifts we are given while discarding any stumbling blocks to any blockade to the full blossoming of these given possibilities. So responsibility, and then beyond, the next step after responsibility, because from responsibility ultimately came the shrinking of the ego. in some level, it can only shrink so far. As long as we're in this form, we'll both have a personality. And where is the line sometimes between personality, which seems to be an intrinsic part of us that stays, it's the one constant perhaps in our spiritual journey that remains. So it's semantics, the difference between personality and ego. Ego seems to have such negative connotations, but ego is not without its uses as long as it's relegated in the hierarchy of what you understand. You see the ego there, just as you hear the thoughts, the monkey mind, still there, just as the foibles of your personality. Are you a grouchy guy? Are you always smiling? I have to remember to smile. Maybe I'm smiling on the inside, but the demeanor on the outside. That's why I picked this name, Zen with a Smile, as a reminder that I needed to smile. And it takes reminder. It's a work in progress. I don't greet the world with a smile. This is not my default expression. My default is kind of but colored through the lenses of equanimity. So, through responsibility, came at least to working on all that is in my control, or that all that is available to be in my control, to have self-mastery even over yourself. To have mastery over yourself is incredibly difficult, requiring vigilance, constant vigilance. But this responsibility, this effort to be what you've always known you are, will lead to the ultimate, will lead ultimately to dispelling fear, finding fear as groundless. So, first steps, those of you first steps, taking responsibility, no longer tolerating any sense of victimhood, assigning blame other than right here is a useless and time-consuming and time-wasting pursuit. Acceptance, relegating the ego and the monkey mind to at least a muffled or not placing any credence, not looking for guidance from the monkey mind or the ego. Understanding that as long as we're human, we have a personality, and this personality sticks with us from birth to passing. And sometimes when I'm bored, I entertain the idea that parts of our personality remain with us throughout our spiritual journey. Whether this journey includes reincarnating in this dimension that we find ourselves, or reincarnating on other dimensions, other planets. All these things I've more than considered. At some level, through the dreaming state, I've experienced these things. So, accepting responsibility, expanding your heart and finding unity, the commonality, will help you to change the collective imagination, collective agreement, collective governance. As you understand the illusory nature of all these imaginings, as your view expands, you start to understand that you have an active role in creating the matter of your mind, the matter of your universe, the matter of your being. You don't assign this to someone else, to any teacher, to any guru, no matter how great and how accomplished they seem to be. You remember that they are both living examples while pointing the way to your individual paths of exploration. Ultimately, as Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. So, isn't it fun to entertain the idea that you can manipulate that part and parcel of you, actually the you that you really are, that all that you are, you can manipulate your consciousness, can not only participate in how you experience the world, but one step beyond that, you can be a participant in changing these agreements, changing the collective through individual and personal efforts, to the point that you can see, experience, taste, feel, speak of what you envision. You're throwing off the shackles of these covenants, of these agreements, secular, religious, which serve to limit while offering a modicum of protection for your fragile ego. So I'm hoping that you will begin to look at the world with new eyes, with new senses, because indeed, at each heartbeat, each breath, each artificial measurement of time, seconds, minutes, you're renewed. It offers an opportunity for your consciousness to become more active in construction of the matter that you always were led to believe were concrete, limited. You replace this static with perpetual motion. Perpetual motion in and of itself implies change. The only constant that I've been able to come up with. So what does this mean? Well, on a simple level, it means that opportunities to change all that has had a limiting effect, whether to closely bind you to your monkey mind or your ego. So, when we talk about here is the only source that we can look to, control, to understand is here, and the outside is seemingly beyond our grasp. But look at this. Again, by going within, by embracing within, by accepting responsibility, by banishing fear, by letting go of jealousy and pettiness and materialism, you find yourself on a new platform, a platform that changes before you can even speak, offering you an opportunity to use your consciousness to create the matter, to create the world that you want to live in.